This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, helping you to navigate your private practice journey. This is session number 101 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, everyone. I'm Gordon Brewer, and I'm glad you're listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast. And we are officially in the triple digits. Can you believe that? Episode number 101. If you haven't had a chance, I would encourage you to go back and listen to episode number 100, which was obviously the previous episode to this one. And it was a special episode in which I pulled up clips and people from previous podcast episodes and just had a great time pulling all of that together. It's a little bit longer podcast. It's about an hour's worth of listening, but I really kind of pulled in kind of some of the best of. I didn't get all the best of because there were too many, but really pulled those in. And just the title of that podcast episode were the essential elements of private practice, because that theme just kind of came together as I started pulling the podcast together. So I would commend that to you to go back and listen to that previous episode. Here it is halfway through October already, and it's hard for me to believe that we're this far into the month of October. Excuse me just a second. I'm going to get a sip of water. But what I'm really pumped about is next week I'm going to be leaving to head to Colorado and be with all of my friends out at Killing It Camp that Joe Sanok at the Practice of the Practice is sponsoring out in Estes Park, Colorado. And I'm just really excited about that, going on that trip. It's going to be a bunch of private practice owners getting together and talking about private practice. I'm going to be doing a workshop on G Suite and G Suite for Therapists, which is the course that's available out there. I've also been working this past week on some updates and the next version of what I call the Session Note Helper. And that is just a system that using the tools of Google G Suite, where you can really quickly write session notes using a Google form that just gives you different things to choose from. And then when you hit submit, it turns it into a Google Doc. And so I've been working with an app developer to help me refine that and really make the whole system safer and more HIPAA compliant. So keep an eye and ear out about that. Currently I've got that kind of the availability of that system. I've taken it offline because we were running into some problems with one of the other add-ons that had been used for that system. But the great thing about the whole Session Note Helper system is that it can be used with your electronic health record system like TherapyNotes. And that's what I do in my practice, is I use that to kind of put together a narrative, and then I cut and paste that into TherapyNotes. Although TherapyNotes platform is great for writing notes, and I would say pick what works best for you. But anyway, got that coming up, and you'll hear more about that. Didn't mean to get too sidetracked on that. The other thing I want to let you know about is depending on when you're listening to this episode, hopefully you're early in the week, but I think when it's coming out, some of you might be kind of past the event date. But anyway, I just wanted to mention it anyway. I'm doing another free webinar with Julie Harris from Green Oak Accounting, and we're doing a webinar on business entities. And when I say a business entity, I'm talking about like an LLC, limited liability corporation, and why you would want to form one for your private practice. And we're going to talk about all the nuts and bolts of that, and just from taxes to how you set them up, and kind of hit some of the legal highlights of why you would want to do that, why you wouldn't want to do it, all those kinds of things we're going to be covering in that webinar. But if you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com, business entities webinar, you can get access to that and you can get the replay. So be sure to go over and register, whether you're hearing this after we have the webinar or not. It's going to be actually on October the 15th at 5 p.m. Eastern time. It's the live webinar, but we'll have the replay available for those that register for the webinar. So join us for that. If you're interested in learning more about business entities and forming all that kind of stuff. So I am so excited about our guest today, Michelle Hardman. And Michelle, I can't remember exactly how we connected, but she reached out to me or something. But anyway, what was funny, kind of the small world kind of thing, I didn't really pay much attention to it when we were arranging for her being on the podcast, but she's from my hometown, or she's in my hometown, Cary, North Carolina. And I started looking up where her office was located, and she's in my old neighborhood. So it's a great small world. And so, but I'm looking forward to you hearing about Michelle's journey in private practice and all the neat stuff that she's doing. She's another person that has really is out there to help other therapists in the whole business side of things. She's got an MBA. She's got a business background to begin with, which is real unusual. But she's also started a website called The Primed Practice, primedpractice.com. And so I'm looking forward to you hearing from Michelle. So without further ado, here is Michelle Hardman. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the Practice of Therapy podcast. And I'm so excited to have Michelle Hardman with me today. And we were just catching up here before we started. She's, I'm going to call her one of my hometown girls because she's from my hometown, which I didn't realize until I started looking at her information and everything. So welcome, Michelle. I'm so glad you're on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yes, I am too. And Michelle has got some really, really cool stuff that she's doing, and I'm excited for listeners to hear about it. And but Michelle, as I start with everyone, why don't you tell folks a little bit about your private practice journey and how you've landed where you've landed in private practice and all that you're doing now?
Yeah, awesome. Well, hello, everybody. I would love to share a little bit about my story. I actually wanted to be in private practice since I was about 15 years old. As a kid that had some anxiety, I had a counselor who really impacted my life in a positive way. And as life happens, as much as I wanted to be a counselor, I got through college and I ended up getting an MBA sort of as a base plate for myself as I entered into the work world. And I kind of fell into human resources and I loved it. So life took a detour for me for almost 16 years. And I was actually in human resources leadership. So when I resigned from my last position in human resources, I was a senior director of human resources and corporate services. And so I guess what really prompted me to make the change and go back to what I wanted to do since I was 15 was my dad actually got sick and he struggled 2 years with cancer. And after he passed away, I remembered him saying to me, "I've never worked a day in my life." And I thought he was full of crap. And I always thought it was so cool that he said that. And I thought, life is too short. I am burnt out in this human resources thing and this corporate America thing. Frankly, I was real over. Mm-hmm. And I decided to go back to school and get an MED so I could counsel people in the context of their entire life, their whole life, and not just their career life. And that was probably, 8 years ago that I'd made that change. 9 years ago. And I haven't looked back. It's been amazing.
Yeah. Wow. I'm so glad you're in this profession.
Thank you.
Yes.
It's such an honor to be in this space with people, and it's such a sacred space. And I truly, I'm kind of at a loss for words whenever I think about it, but it's been such an amazing experience. And
Mm-hmm.
it's been surprising in ways too, you know, Gordon, because when I came into this, I was bound and determined I was going to do private practice. And it never occurred to me that my MBA and all that corporate stuff would ever help me in private practice, which is a little bit embarrassing to say, as I said to you when we were first chatting, because, you know, it seems sort of obvious, but it's been an amazing combination of things for me as I've grown in the private practice world.
Right. Well, you're, as you probably know, you're a bit of an outlier in that, you know, getting that business background before you went into private practice really put you way ahead, step ahead. And what I'm so glad about is the fact that you're sharing that with others through your coaching and consulting website, The Primed Practice. So tell folks about that, and you know, just kind of how you worked your way into that whole part of what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. It is such a special, fun place for me because I still love all things business, and I do love all the clinical things too. I'm kind of a unicorn, as they say, because I am a little bit of an outlier. You know, there's not a lot of people that I've come across that have that MBA and that experience. So when I opened my private practice and it ramped up and grew and I was full really quickly, other folks just started asking me, you know, what did you do? What's your secret sauce? And I was really shocked by it because I kind of took for granted the things that I knew from my business life and that I was applying it and I didn't even realize it when I opened my private practice and started running it. And so I paid attention when people asked me questions. And so this idea of coaching on the business side for people in private practice grew really organically because it was nowhere on my radar when I first started. So just, you know, talking with people, answering questions, and then really starting to formulate that and put some structure around it to coach people. Because I don't have a secret sauce. I just, you know, had this other experience before I came into the clinical world. So my toolbox was supplied a little bit differently when I started. And man, I loved it so much, you know, talking with clinicians and breaking down the business, whether it's business planning, marketing, branding, you know, referral networks, becoming a cash pay business, whatever the case may be. It was so exciting to see clinicians have these epiphanies and go, oh my gosh, this doesn't have to be that scary. I just have to really fill in the gap of knowledge, you know, and figure out how to apply it.
Right. And the other thing too that I noticed really quickly when I was looking at, I was snooping your websites, and one of the things that you've done well, it's one of the things I do before I interview people, just so I know a little bit about them. But
I love it.
So one of the things that I noticed is that you've done a really great job of really kind of diversifying income streams in different ways. Like, for example, I saw that you're doing Brene Brown workshops, which I picked up very quickly. You're very passionate about her work, which I am as well. And I refer to it a lot. So tell folks a little bit about that. And that seems like that bleeds over not only on the clinical side of working with clients, but also in your coaching.
Absolutely. You are spot on. It is, yes, you picked up correctly. I'm very passionate about it. Her work, as so many people know, you know, she's so relatable, and talking about, you know, the ability to break things down into digestible bits. Her research, her empirical data, the way she presents it and talks about it, it just fascinates me. She's so great. And we can all relate to it, you know, it's part of the human experience, I think. So it's been so amazing to apply that information. I went through the Brene Brown certification for the Daring Way, probably 3 or 4 years ago now. Wow. And I use it with individuals, you know, like I said, I work with people with anxiety and trauma. So shame can certainly show up in spades there, you know, in big ways. And you're right. I do use it a lot in the coaching side of my business because, you know, spoiler alert, right? We're not trained in grad school about business. And so we don't have some of that knowledge when we start to go into private practice. And it can feel like shame sometimes, like I'm supposed to know these things, but I
Right.
don't. And
Yeah.
I see it so much when I'm coaching, and I get it. I mean, even for me, I mean, even though I have an MBA, right? Like it's scary. Like I tell people every time I
Hmm.
publish a newsletter, I have to sit on it for about 24 hours because it's this push pull internally that we have,
Right.
So
Yeah.
I love applying the Daring Way and Rising Strong from that curriculum in the coaching
Hmm.
process, because it's so applicable.
Right. Yeah. The thing about Brene Brown that just always sticks out for me is just the importance of allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, of
Yes.
just putting ourselves out there. And, that's really, it's, I'm reminded of the Netflix series. I'm sure you've seen it,
Oh
not
yeah.
series, but the Netflix talk, The Call to
Mhm.
Courage. And,
Yeah.
I've one of the things I've been doing particularly with the couples that I work with, is that's kind of my go-to homework
Yeah.
assignment with them, here lately.
Yeah.
But
Love it.
yeah, but
Yeah.
it takes a lot of courage to be in private practice, especially for those of us that have
Absolutely.
made that transition from kind of a steady job, steady paycheck, and
Hmm.
just kind of
Yeah.
the comfort of that. It really does require some
Yeah.
vulnerability. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. It really does. And that can be hard to work with, and our energy is drained, because we do really important, really sacred work with people when we're working with them. And that can be draining on our energy. And
hmm,
it's easy for self-care to fall off the radar, even though we're teaching people all the time about vulnerability and courage and self-care. Sometimes we're the worst ones at staying on top of it. And I saw that too from just, I felt like kind of an outsider coming into the clinical world and private practice because of my previous experience. When I opened my private practice, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to start a business. And that's sort of a paradigm shift and really what a lot of us are taught even in grad school.
hmm.
Speaking of shame, we can actually sometimes feel shame when we're running a profitable business as a private practice.
Right.
And I'm so sad about that. I really wanted to create tools and create space in the coaching realm that we could work through that and
Hmm.
create sort of a different mindset for ourselves in this business, because we got into this business to help people and we're passionate about it. And we deserve to also have a thriving life ourselves doing this important work. And
Hmm.
so that's kind of where at that point, about I don't know, 2 years ago was when I really said to myself, okay, I have to make the primed practice into a real thing in another segment of my business. Cause it was just like this fire in my belly that just kept growing. So yeah,
Hmm.
it's really fun.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that's so true. I think about being in grad school and the fact that we're so ingrained with being able to help people and doing no harm, and
Right.
somewhere along the way, we get this message that to be businesslike or to market or any of that is not helping people, and that's
Right.
so much of that is not true. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things I hear most when I'm coaching with people, they'll say to me, well, I'm not a salesperson. I'm not good at selling myself. And I always say that's okay. You don't have to be, right? Because it's really about showcasing your strengths and your skills and what you can provide to the people that are your ideal client and being able to communicate that effectively. Marketing is
Hmm.
about the relationship and about cultivating the relationship and not selling. Like, I don't have to
Right.
convince you to come see me, right?
Hmm.
If you're looking for someone to work with and you hear where I'm coming from and what I have to offer, then that's going to resonate with you or not. And so marketing isn't just about, putting yourself out there. It's also a really great filter, right? Like, I'm going to
Hmm.
attract the right people and I'm also going to repel the people that aren't ideal fits for me.
Yeah.
So I love all of that stuff. So it's
Right.
been really fun
Yeah.
In the last year, really bringing the primed practice into its own business segment and really trying to be creative about productivity tools that could be created to help break these things down. I know you work with couples, and I always think of Gottman, how he said small things often. And I kind of think small things often for clinicians too in the business realm, right? Like we don't have to have this huge business plan and this whole huge marketing strategy that's so, overwhelming. We can do small things often and make the business work and be really mindful and intentional about what we're doing.
Right. Yeah. And I agree with you 100%. It's just, as I continue to learn is that, it is the small things that matter most. And we can only do so much in a day. And so I think being able to think about, okay, what are the small things I'm going to do today that are going to move the needle forward and move me forward in things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right.
And I think staying engaged, that's one of the things I love about a planner is that if we're not trained in business as clinicians and it feels overwhelming or scary, right? Fear is going to show up, and that's normal because we weren't trained in it. Then to have a tool that has those prompts along the way that keeps us engaged instead of avoiding or deferring these things that could really help our practice flourish. I really wanted to kind of put a structure around that was in an engaging sort of, even fun way.
Right.
And so it's been fun brainstorming around that and bringing the primed planner into existence in that spirit.
Right. Yeah. So tell folks maybe a little more about how you developed that and just what's in the primed planner. And of course, we'll have links in the show notes and show summary for people to access that.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks. So the primed planner is just published. This is the first run of it for 2020, and it's been published and available now on my website. But it really is a planner, but it's so much more than just a schedule keeper. It really was developed in the spirit and love of the business. So to create prompts both for self-care, networking, follow-up items. And I tried to be really structured in the planner so that, yes, you have a monthly calendar. Yes, you have your weekly calendar. But there's also an annual roadmap in the beginning. And so you can really take some time to think about what your skills and gifts and talents are, things that energize you, things that don't energize you, what some of your goals may be for the year, and really start to think about quarterly. If you think about a GPS, right? If you go on a road trip, you've got a map. And so I really wanted people to start thinking about in the beginning of the year, what's my map of the private practice going to look like this year? What's this journey going to be like this year? What stops do I want to make? How much progress do I want to make? And what's that going to require? And so to have the annual roadmap and then quarterly milestones so that we can, check along the way. Because I don't know about you, but I've been on road trips with my GPS and I get the recalculating. Right. Yeah. And so, things shift throughout the year, and that's okay. But if we don't stay engaged regularly, and if we're not tracking that for ourselves in some way, we may not know when we're off track, and we may not know when we need to recalculate or how we could even do that. So It's really important in the business, right, to be successful and to flourish, that we can measure that in some way. And I wanted to, and the primed planner is sort of a colorful, fun layout, and it's not stuffed with a bunch of business jargon and strategy this and business plan that. I really wanted it to feel more digestible and relatable. Because so many of us aren't versed in all that business jargon and all that business stuff. And frankly, at least in the coaching that I've done, a lot of people that I've worked with don't want to talk about it in those terms. And I get it, because those aren't terms that are familiar to us. So just trying to make it, fun and accessible for us and useful, and a tool that somebody, instead of going, oh gosh, do I have to pick up that thing and do that now? We're excited to pick it up and do the next thing.
Right. Yeah. So one question that comes to mind for me is maybe something that might be helpful to people is just thinking about goal setting. What tips
Mhm.
would you give around that? I know there are a lot of different ideas about goal setting that are out there.
Mhm.
What have you kind of learned along the way?
Yeah, it's a great question. It comes up a lot. And some of my Brene Brown training will show now, but I'm a real
Mhm.
big believer in knowing what your own core values are. If you think about building a house, you want to build a solid foundation for your house to
Mhm.
sit on, right? And if I'm thinking about my business and marketing and branding and things like that, if I don't know or haven't built a strong foundation for that message to be built on, then it could come off inauthentic and it could come off flat. And that's not what we want. You are a passionate and brilliant clinician, right? So you deserve to have this solid foundation. So I encourage people, even before the goal setting, to think about what are your core values for yourself and how do you align your business and build on those values.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and then start thinking about the goals for the actual business, because they, just like you build a house, you build the foundation first, and then you put in the subfloor and you start building the
Mm.
scaffolding around the walls. And that's sort of the goal piece to me. So does
Mhm.
that make sense how those might build on each other?
Yeah, yeah, it does. And I think one of the ways that I think about that concept is, and again, people have heard this from me a lot, is really understanding your why. You know, why do you want to
Absolutely.
do this? Because again, I love the metaphor that you used of the kind of the roadmap. If you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there? So, I mean, that's just, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And so having some
Yeah.
clarity around that is I think just so
Yeah.
important. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I think you're absolutely right.
yeah. So what are some of the other things that you've got kind of on the horizon with and you've got the planner, and I think that's a brilliant idea, because I know, as we were chatting about before we started, um, I tend to geek out on those kinds of things too, as far as I've shared with folks a little bit about my planner and using it. And it really does keep
Yeah.
me on track. And I'm really,
Yeah. It makes a
fortunately
big difference.
yeah, yeah, but fortunately this year I've been pretty faithful about using the tool as it should be used. And I know that
Mm-hmm.
when I don't use that tool, um, it just feels like my life gets a little bit chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
which is a perfect sort of data point on how a planner can help be that roadmap, right?
right.
And sort of keep you on track. And the other thing that it can do is it can also be a great filter, because if I want to go to a training and I don't know, say I want to go to a 2-day training in Raleigh, I don't have to travel. It's local for me here. But if I've got a workshop that I'm going to be doing, and, it's easy to get excited about something or double book ourselves. I mean, I don't know if I'm the only
Mhm.
one that's ever done that, but I certainly have done it. It can be, it can be a great filter too, right? To remind
Yeah.
us like, no, this isn't where your priority was. You really wanted to go, you really wanted to launch these trainings. So you need to focus on the training. So,
Mhm.
um, I always have this visual of like a bowling alley when they have the bumpers down in the gutters for kids, right? So the ball
Mhm.
doesn't go in the gutter. It's sort
Uh-huh.
of like it can keep us on track in that way.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, some of the stuff that's going on aside from the planner is, not everybody's a geek out over planners kind of person like me or like you.
Uh-huh.
I love that. But I also appreciate that people that don't want to use it still might want to use the tools that are in the planner. So I actually also created some printable downloads with some of the same tools that are just made for somebody who doesn't want the calendaring piece
Mhm.
necessarily. So I was real excited to put those out there for people as well. And then I have some stickers and things like that for, like if you like to use those kind of things, which I also geek out over stickers.
Mhm.
So, tax reminders, consultation, supervision, conference, networking, meetings for coffee, Those are the kinds of things to try and help just make it a little bit more fun.
Right.
So that's sort of on the tool side, and there's more productivity tools coming. So that's so exciting to me because I love being able to get my creative on with all of that stuff.
Right. Right.
But as you mentioned, the Brene Brown piece, I'm also really starting to roll out some Brene Brown workshops centered around and on the Daring Way curriculum, but really working on it and offering it for private practice clinicians or clinicians who are interested in private practice, because it's really so powerful to take that curriculum and overlay it on how that shows up for us in the business that we run. And I've seen that be really useful for folks as they delve deeper into growing their private practice or really starting to get serious about opening a new private practice. So some of those trainings and some other online trainings, like for Marketing Mojo, how to get out of your own way. And so, yeah, I've got some fun stuff coming down the pike for 2020. Wow.
Well, I would encourage people to definitely check out your website, theprimedpractice.com. Is that correct?
That's it. Theprimedpractice.com.
Yeah. So, well, the other thing I guess I was curious about with those workshops that you're doing, are those live workshops, or are they online, or what's the format for that for you?
Yeah. So the Daring Way for private practice clinicians that I'm working on right now is one that I'm doing only locally and live. So that actually takes place here in Cary, North Carolina in person. I'm not sure about the format for an online version of that, although I've thought about it, to be determined, kind of not clear in my head what that would be like, because part of what's so powerful in that workshop is that we're all sitting together in a room. It's usually a fairly small group. And, we're talking about hard stuff. And of course, shame comes up. We're talking about Brene Brown's work, right? So I really like to have people nearby and with each other so we can collaborate and support together, in a very authentic way, sitting in the same room. So for now, that's how that one's being offered.
Right. That makes sense.
That can be hard. Hard stuff can come up in that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then the Marketing Mojo, how to get out of your own way, that's going to be via Zoom, and that's going to be online. It's an hour format. It will be live, and I'm working on creating that and turning it into something that people could download and just do it on their own time at their own pace. That's sort of my goal for it. It's not there yet, but we're getting there.
Yeah, that would be a great, sounds like a good idea for an online course. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So I've gotten good feedback about it so far, and I'm excited to offer it again. It's coming up in November 15th is the next offering for that. And I'm really excited about it, but I'm hoping sometime within no later than the second quarter of 2020 that it would be an online course that folks could do at their own pace and in their pajamas if they so choose.
Okay. That's great. Well, Michelle, I'm just so glad you've been on the podcast, and I want to be mindful of your time, but tell folks again just how they can get in touch with you and where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to have a chat with anybody. You can reach me via email at michelle@michellehardman.com. And it's Michelle with 2 L's and Hardman with a D as in David, Michelle Hardman. So, but my website, as you mentioned, Gordon, is theprimedpractice.com. And my clinical website is michellehardman.com. And in either of those websites, you can reach me through a contact form as well. And then, of course, you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram at The Primed Practice. So I would love to connect with folks. I tell people we're relationship professionals. So to me, the world goes round in this business, especially on relationships. So I'm always happy to meet new folks in the field and collaborate, whether that's from a distance or nearby. So I always welcome new opportunities to chat with folks.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being on the podcast. And I'm looking forward to connecting again and catching up. And definitely we'll try to figure out a way to have coffee when I'm in Cary next.
I would love that. Yeah, I appreciate you having me. Thank you so much, Gordon. It's been a pleasure to talk with you and share all this with your folks.
Yeah, good. And we'll have, as I mentioned earlier, we'll have links to everything here in the show notes. So take care. Well, I hope you enjoyed hearing from Michelle, and I'm so glad that I got to know her and connected with her, and just excited about all the stuff that she's doing. She has a really beautiful website, by the way, so go check it out, theprimedpractice.com, and I'm sure what Michelle and I will you'll be hearing more from her here on the podcast as well. So do check out today's sponsor, our sponsor for the Practice of Therapy podcast, TherapyNotes. They are really the leaders in electronic health record systems, and they've got one of the best. They are who I use in my practice. So be sure and go check them out at TherapyNotes.com. And then if you'll use the coupon code Gordon, just GORDON, you can get 2 months free of their services. But check them out. They've got a really nice platform, and I couldn't live without it in my practice. Also, be sure to check out the Business Entities webinar that I'm doing with Julie Harris, and you can get to that at practiceoftherapy.com/business entities webinar. And that's the URL. There's also a link on the page at practiceoftherapy.com. Practiceoftherapy.com, there's a banner at the top where you can register. Well, even if the webinar is over, register, and that way you can get access to the replay of that. And also one other mention I'll put here at the end is, as I mentioned, I'm going to Estes Park next week, and going to be talking to the folks there about G Suite for Therapists. And if you're not in Estes Park, you won't get to hear that presentation. But anyway, you can still get my course, G Suite for Therapists. And I'm doing some updates to it, but go ahead and take advantage of it now, because I will go up on the price once I start all the things I'm going to be adding to it. And so go check that out. practiceoftherapy.com/G Suite course. And that way you can get to that particular resource, along with all the other resources I've got on the webpage. So take care, folks. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend, whenever you might be listening to this. And thanks for taking time to subscribe to the podcast, and leave us a review if you feel so moved. Because I'm always glad to get emails and comments from people, just kind of reaffirming that the podcast is helpful to them. So take care, folks. We'll talk to you next week. You have been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free Private Practice Startup Guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.